Joe, how are you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Good
Great.
good to see you. One thing I forgot to mention, just want to give it a few minutes. There's usually a little bit of a lag, give people a chance to that will log on live with us today. Give them a chance to jump on. While we're doing that, I actually meant to ask you this earlier. Where you're in Canada, aren't you?
Yeah, I live in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Where's that in reference to which side?
Okay, think of Seattle. It's north of Seattle.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah, it's right on the coast.
So obviously I'm all the way on the East Coast in the United States, but thank goodness for technology, right?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Um, yeah, I used to live in the States. I lived in Santa Monica in part of Los Angeles County for many years.
Yeah, you probably just didn't want to pay those taxes after a while.
I got taxes wherever you go.
Yeah.
Someone once told someone I was complaining many, many years ago to a friend of mine about taxes going up. And he looked at me and said, I'm surprised you talk about that. And I said, You are? I said, So why are you surprised? He said, Well, you know as well as I do. He said, if something goes up, the taxes go up, you just make a bit more money. That's all and pay for it.
That's it. That's
And I
it.
went, and it was like it was such an obvious thing. I thought, yes, okay, but that's another little building block in not a block, but a little sort of cornerstone moment.
I love it. I love it. Well, Michael, there's probably a fair amount in this particular group, the in-home sales professionals that don't um, don't know who Michael Oliver is. Would you mind just giving us a backstory and then we can take off? I got a ton of questions that I know I'd like to ask, but the whole idea is really just to have a good dialogue with each other. Try to pick your brain as much as I possibly can, and bring as much value to the group as possible today, if that's okay.
Well,
But definitely would love to, for folks that don't know you, give a better understanding of who's Michael Oliver.
well, I'm still working that out for myself, so I'm not sure I can help you too much there, but I'll do my best. If we put in the context of sales, I'll just give you a bit of background. I mean, I started selling in 1980, primarily because I'd done just about every single job there had been, and was either fired or left before I was fired. So I was basically unemployable. So I took the only thing I thought was probably the my last escape was selling, and just fell into it. Sold solar energy systems in Southern California, hot water solar energy that's domestic as well as apartment building. In fact, I was the second most, I want to say most successful because it depends on how you define success, but I made the most sales in 1980, 81 on apartment buildings. Used to sell these systems for between $7,500 and $95,000. I worked out a process of how to sell it. I knew nothing about what I know today about selling. In fact, I discovered later that I was explaining it to someone. They said, "Oh, you weren't selling solar," and I said, "I wasn't." They said, "No, you're selling a um, um, what do you call it? Um, oh, I can't remember the word now, but it's to protect your money. What's the word when you protect your money?
Investment.
No, it wasn't even an investment. It was. Oh, it's not funny. Just the word came to me and I lost. But anyway, he said you were selling a tax shelter. That's what it was, a tax
Oh
shelter.
yeah.
Because I worked out all these depreciation costs and stuff like this, and I put them on laid them out in front of the owner. And I would say to the owner, I'd give them the price right up front, say, this is going to cost you $45,000. Because I worked out that was the best thing to do. And then I would show them how that $45,000 could be recovered over a short period of time. In fact, interestingly, it could be recovered within 24 months, even if the system didn't turn on because of all the rebates and depreciation. So I started working on that. And then I started, after a long period of time, losing a few sales and discovered that the reason I was losing them is that people had copied everything I was doing, because previous people I'd shown my stuff to, they'd show it to another salesperson, and they sort of twigged to what was going on there. So interesting how I got copied also later in life, such as right now. But that's where it all started. But here's the key: is that I just did not like the process. I mean, I went with the process, but I hated. I just hated every single minute. It's like I was tense all the time, and I went into selling other things. attics installation. There was huge amounts of commissions available on that. Also, saving on electricity. But it was always full of tension, and the whole idea of treating people that way just didn't sit well with me. So I just felt there had to be a better way. Except I don't call it a better way now. I just call it another way because it's less confrontational and unconfrontational. And worked on that for a long time, for some like 17 years. Processing until I found the key. I found the actual key that was missing in every single sales program, and it still is. Every single sales program still misses this vital mindset key, which I call now natural selling mindset. And that's where I worked through. I started sales training in 1997. Started with the network marketing industry, actually. I had the same attitude towards network marketing as most people did until someone came along and said, this is the work with network marketing. Come and give it at least a show. Come and talk in front of our people. And so I did. 100 people I spoke to them about it, and they just loved it. And I thought, okay, something tweaked here. And so I wrote my first book, How to Sell Network Marketing Without Fear, Anxiety, or Losing Your Friends, which is the basic philosophy behind all of this. I subsequently wrote another book, How to Sell the Way People Buy, and now have an online course. But that's really what started it all. And it just captured everyone's imagination because I was doing what no one else was doing, and people were resonating with it. And that was great. It was a great feeling. So that's a very rough thumbnail sketch. If you've got another 2 hours, I can give you a lot more, but I'm not going to.
No, that's now I got to ask you, if you don't mind, what was it that you discovered was the key?
Detachment is about letting go of the sale. One of the things I was doing, I was working with a company. I helped a company. It was a technological company in the United Kingdom in 1995. Raise some money, investment, about £600,000. And the investor said, would you come over and teach our salespeople, train our salespeople? And as a condition. So I worked out an arrangement. So I went and lived in the UK for 9 months, training salespeople, doing one-on-one, driving up and down the UK. And we'd go to preset appointments. I would do the first appointment. They would do the second, and backwards and forwards. And we talk about, how it went, what we did, and so on. And they always came out with a comment with, how come you always get the easy ones? Which was interesting because I never did get the easy ones. I just knew how to talk with them in a different way. And I wasn't really I kind of hadn't really worked it out, and suddenly it tweaked. And the reason they were easy, as it were, or I was making more sales, was that I was not attached to the sale. I just had this vibration where I was there to help, and that suddenly occurred to me, and I realized that was the missing link, the key. So after a period of time, I was talking with someone. I said, well, what do you really want to do with your life? And I said, I want to train this. And they said, go ahead and do it. So I put together natural selling and started training that, and as part of detachment. And that was embedded even further when I became a certified trainer with Deepak Chopra, with a Chopra Center. I was living in La Jolla at the time. I was just a block away from the Chopra Center. And I was reading the book, Seven Spiritual Laws of Success. And I suddenly realized why people were coming to me saying this is vibrationally so acceptable. And because one of the laws in there was the law of detachment. So that's a whole nother story, but just to cut it short, they had a course, and I took the course. It was a week-long course, and got to grips with the kind of the philosophy behind it, the sort of holistic value, and then discovered they were going to put together a course on how to train it, how to become a corporate trainer. So I did that, and then was invited by the Chopra Center to actually put on a seminar, a workshop, 3-day workshop called Natural Selling and the Seven Spiritual Laws of Success. And so that was really the foundation, and that was really the missing link, is that inside there is the way of selling, the way of thinking comes from a very holistic place. And that resonates with most people. Even if it's the most hardened salesperson, it will resonate with most hardened salesperson, it will resonate with most hardened salespeople, and also most hardened owners of businesses or buyers, purchasers, that type of thing. So there's kind of an overview of really what's behind all of this.
That's one of the law. That's one of his laws in the book, right? His law of detachment as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. There's 7 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Now when you say detach, I mean it's hard, but what's the opposite of that? Like obviously what probably a lot of us are unfortunately doing now, but what's the other way?
Well,
Where
it's
do you
really about
see
well, the
most?
opposite is attachment to your own needs.
Ah,
You know, I mean, if you look upon it logically, sometimes it's a bit hard to grasp, but it's not an intellectual type of thing. You can look upon it intellectually, but it's really about internal. Where are you coming from internally? And it's how you adjust your mindset to start thinking about things differently. And I'm very contrary. I am not a person who accepts other people's beliefs, ideas, or anything like that quite willingly. I will question them. I even question my own beliefs. I don't believe what I believe in a sense that you have to have beliefs, but if you start believing in your beliefs, then you're doomed in many ways. Many ways, you have to keep questioning your beliefs, right?
yeah.
There was a English philosopher, Bertrand Russell, who said, "I would never die for my beliefs because I could be wrong." you know and who knows what truth is really. We talk about our own truth. Well, my truth could be different than your truth, but your truth actually could be more truthful. They say there basically are 3 truths in the world. There's your truth, my truth, and the real truth. And for me, it's always about attempting to find the real truth, whatever the real truth is. And sometimes the real truth varies. And so change is constant. The one thing about life is that change is constant, and to accept change. So when you talk about detachment or attachment, is that most people are attached to something. Salespeople are attached. Many salespeople are attached to their own needs. Need to make a sale, the need to treat people's questions or concerns as objections to be overcome, the need to present, the need to be right. There's dozens and dozens of needs, and the more that we can shave those needs away and move them, just get rid of them, then the more we find that people will resonate with us. We'll see the world in a different way. We see the world as it is because we've interpreted that world based on what we've been told, what we believe. When we start shifting our beliefs and start shifting our prejudices and start shifting our desires, the world actually becomes a very different place. And people will respond to you very differently if you talk with them. Think first and talk with them in a different way. It's quite remarkable.
That's
Does that make sense?
no, it does. I mean, it's the minute we stop seeking truth, I think is kind of the end, right? And become closed off for the wrong reasons, especially in the home, become very assumptive, don't listen, right? Don't seek to understand all those things. I think that's very real. You
Yeah.
mentioned in the natural way of selling, or I'm sorry, the sell the way that people sell the way that
People buy.
people buy. Sorry. In chapter 3, you talk about, because I think this is very important. You were talking about fear of rejection, and it not being the problem. Can you deep dive a little bit on it? I don't want to give away any more than
Yeah, it's fine.
obviously I recommend people.
It's fine. Ask whatever you want. It's
I
just
mean,
so
I
much.
just think it's, there's a lot of things that I mean, you talk about in here that are, I guess what I'm getting at is you and I talked about this recently, where there's a lot of people in our space that sell the way they sell. It works for them. And you taught me this, and it's my favorite line is, and I appreciate it. You say, hey, look, it's not an either or. It's what you teach and what you recommend is an as well. If I can take what you already do and improve it this much more, whatever, why wouldn't we want to take advantage of it? But we were talking earlier about, and I think it's true. It's, hey, I do what I do in the, I sell the way I sell in the home. It's the way I was taught. Whatever. It's this typical way, pretty standardized, right, process. But deep down, they know, they almost are exhausted at the end of the day because of all the friction.
Yeah.
And that
I mean,
fear of rejection, typically is popular, or, is common.
well, the fear of rejection, as you asked me, is not the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. The problem is what is causing the fear. And unless you get to the cause of something, the other thing will always stay. The fear will always stay. And so you have to get to the cause of that problem. And what is the cause? The cause is the way that you've been taught to sell, and the way you're using the way you're actually approaching selling, and you're approaching people. So, for example, if you're approaching on the need that you have to make a sale, if this is about, if your objective is to make a sale, and I talk about this, it's one of the 5 principles in natural selling. Is like, I ask the question in workshops. I ask the question, what's the purpose of a business? Most people say make money, make profit, and it's not. The purpose of business is to help people solve their problems, or to get what they want, need, or desire. That's the purpose. Your purpose. you know your objective might be to make money, or to be whatever it is, but that's your objective. That's your own personal agenda. And if you swap purpose for objective, and you're going in there with the objective to make money, do you think they feel that vibration? Of course they do, because your words give you away. The questions you ask, the way you ask them, what you say, okay, gives you away every single time. And you won't know it. Most times you won't know it. I can hear it. Why? Because I've been training and listening to a long time. And someone asks me a question, whether I'm out of the study, out in the world or something like that, and someone's talking about buying, I want to buy something, or something. I know whether that's a question that's loaded. I can tell immediately where that's loaded. And I love it, because I'll play with it. I'll play with them. They won't even know I'm playing with it. And I don't do it maliciously. I'm just sort of curious as to see how they might respond to my response. But do potential buyers feel the same thing? Yeah, of course they do. They know whether you're in it for them or in it for you. Excuse me a second. I just have to close the door.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That you talk
so
about
that
intention is
so that
critical.
so it is. It's intention. What is your intention? Is your intention to make a sale, or is your intention to help this person solve a problem, even a problem that they might not know they have? Now, that's the clever part. Is that if you can help them solve something that they don't know that they have. In other words, maybe you ask a consequence question. There's 7 different types of questions in the discovering stage. If you ask a consequence question, which might alert them to something that's going on, it could be a what if question. What if you do this and it doesn't work out? It's a very simple way of asking a question. That continues the conversation, revolving around the what ifs, if you like, the pros and cons, which deepens the potential desire to start thinking more seriously about changing. And what you're doing is you're helping that person go through this process, not to manipulate them. This is not about manipulation to get what you want. This is you could call it manipulation to a certain extent, but it's influencing, helping them influence themselves to rethink what it is they're thinking, so as to come to a better conclusion for themselves. And if you come from that place, believe it or not, it works all the time. And referrals will come out. Even if I've had people who haven't even bought from me giving me referrals, because people will call them, they buy from someone else for some reason or other. Maybe I couldn't help them, because I'm quite honest about it. I say, this is not going to work for you. I suggest that you do this instead. Here's where to go. And I've had people call those people and say, did it work? How's it? So on, who did you go with? And they'll say, well, I went with Joe Blogs, whatever, right? But the person you should really talk with is Michael Oliver. That's how people will respond. Why? Because you're coming from a human behavioral level.
Now, in our world, a lot of times it's considered a sales process, which is ultimately, some form or fashion of a presentation. And I know you kind of look at that as it's one of the principles, right? You talk about in both, and actually both books, if I'm not mistaken, originally Natural Selling, and then Selling the Way People Buy. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's way different than most think. I know from my years of experience in selling in the home, we consider it a demonstration, a presentation where we're telling most of the time.
So I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I have a rough idea, but let me just make it really quick.
Within the you talk about it within the difference between presenting, telling, teaching, persuading in the
Yeah.
book, and how it's more of a I think you used the word dialogue, conversational. It's not so
Okay.
much a rigid process. Am I correct in saying? I don't want to misspeak towards it, but
Yeah. Okay. So the background is that which is what I write in my book, is that behavioral scientists and neuroscientists, have discovered in the sense that there are three levels of thinking. Break it down three levels. There's the first level, and this is of kind of persuasion, if like influence. The first level is about telling or presenting, which is the least effective way to help people. Because the moment you get into a telling, presenting mode, people switch off. They take in just a little bit, then they turn off. They stop listening after a while. So when you in a sales process, if you're taught to go and present the so-called features, advantages, and benefits, right, you're guessing. All you're doing is guessing. You're guessing because don't really know whether any of these features, because each of us in our different realms, we have a lot of different features, and there's sub features there, and they mean absolutely nothing until you can turn it potentially into an advantage and a benefit. An advantage is giving them advantage over doing or having what they don't have presently, for example. A benefit is very personal to them. So even if you start talking about benefits, the benefit of this is that it's not a benefit. A benefit is what it means to you personally. You and I will buy the same thing for totally different reasons. And if you ask people, they will tell you. They will tell you quite deeply why they will buy that, why they want that, and so on. That's a benefit, and you can bring that up and talk about it later. That's emotion. That's feeling. So the lowest form of, if you like, influence is telling. Second one is discussion. Discussion is better because now it's a kind of a flow of information between two people. Debating is good as well. Okay, but there's one thing that is missing in that, and that the person or a person still wants to win. They still want to get their point across, right?
yeah,
Which then causes conflict, just like the first level, it causes conflict. And so discussion, debate causes conflict, potential conflict, not always, but most times. Then you're getting to dialogue. Dialogue is what Socrates used. Dialogue was a basis of educating people through asking questions and allowing people to come to their own conclusions. And these weren't manipulative questions. They were innocent, very easy questions to ask that people could then start questioning their own beliefs, their own judgments, their own what it is that they wanted, and start helping them shift and start exploring exactly sort of their own internal desire to get whatever it is that they wanted. And dialogue is extremely powerful. And dialogue is what natural selling is all about. And it's a mixture of dialogue and if you like, um, and discussion. There's a mixture there. Just a very skilled way of doing it, but it's a very easy way of learning. So those are sort of the three levels of influence, if you like. But one of the worst things you can do is actually enter into, like most sales training is, into presenting what it is that you think they need, because you're guessing. All you're doing is guessing. And when you guess, you're likely to fail. Does that make sense? You got that?
yeah. No, that is, and for some of us, again, that are typically trained and to quote unquote the first version, it's actually the least persuasive in terms of presenting and telling, and versus having a dialogue where it tends to be a little bit more collaborative.
Well, when you get into that collaborative state, um, what happens is that you don't have to do any external manipulative persuasion. It's all done internally. They see when someone answers your question, and it's not a loaded question. It's a conversational type of question, and it can be a very powerful emotional type of question, right? Is that when people reply, many times that's the first time they've actually spoken it out loud. Many times, most people keep the stuff in their mind. The moment they speak it out loud, it's out in the world now. More importantly, they hear it. And when they hear it, they feel it. And that feeling starts the process, internal process of them beginning to rethink what it is that they're doing, what it is they're wanting, why they want it, that type of thing. That's where the conversation is. And here's the key. Just imagine, for example, In the normal sales process, standard sales process, maybe you sit opposite someone. Just imagine that you're sitting opposite with someone across a table. And the normal standard process is, okay, so get on their side of the table or have them get on your side of the table. The natural selling process of thinking first, thinking the process is don't do either. Sit on the side of the table where neither of you sit. Sit together, work together. Rumi, the Sufi saint, once said, beyond the wrongdoing and the right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And that's what you're doing. But you have to create that field first. You have to create that field of based on those 5 principles of coming from this place of non-threatening. Most people basically have 2 questions which are running through their mind, sort of psychologically, when in a sales situation, when they're dealing with a salesperson, is, are you going to make me do something I don't want to do? Okay. And how long will this take? The moment you focus on them, the time disappears. And about making them do something, you don't make them do anything. You say nothing that is going to force them into doing something. You give them autonomy all the time. There's the key. That's a hard thing for standard salespeople to think. Giving that person autonomy. It's their choice. You can actually use those words. You can do this if you like, but it's your choice. The moment you do that, the moment that they become receptive and more open and wanting to do business with you.
Do you, and as I mentioned to you, majority of our space in our industry is in a strategy or process is to ask and facilitate the order on the first sit. So it's a preset appointment. I get issued my appointment. I'm going to go meet maybe a couple that homeowners, and I'm going to, again, the way it currently is, discover, find out what their problems are, what they're looking to solve, and then I'm going to present our solution. Then ultimately, I'm going to ask for their order. Within natural selling, I mean, there's nothing changes within that timeline. It could still be effective in a first sit application, correct?
Yeah, it depends on what you're selling. I mean, if you're selling insurance, for example, you've probably got 2 or 3, discussions go through. So the answer is always depends, but generally the answer is yes. So if you're selling solar energy, window replacement, something like that, then yeah, you can help a person and help them buy it with very much within the first setting. But it depends on how you've set it up. Whether you've walked down the garden path and knocked on the front door, whether you're going to a preset appointment, a lot of it depends on sort of how you set that up in the first place, which is of the 5 stages of natural selling. That's where the connecting stage comes in. For example, on preset appointments, I ask a lot of salespeople, say, well, you get a preset appointment, do you just turn up or do you call them beforehand? And they say, oh yeah, no, I just turn up. In fact, some companies tell them, never to only to turn up, not to call them beforehand. And I say, well, what do you do? And I said, I'd call them beforehand. And so, well, why would you do that? I said, because I can get a lot of information very quickly beforehand. I can do a lot of qualifying beforehand, just really quietly doing some qualifying. I said, but here's the other thing, is that the main qualification is that you're going to make sure that they're there. So you're not going to waste any time. So give them a call, say hi, and just remind them that you're coming. And say, while I'm on the phone, could I just ask you a couple of questions? You ask a couple of questions. Okay, nice questions. They'll remember that conversation. And if the appointment is in a couple of days' time, you call before you arrive. You say, hi, Mr. Jones, this is Michael Oliver. I'm just letting you know that I'll be arriving on time at such and such thing. Now you've got 2 contacts there. Okay, 2 personal contacts. Oh, look at those balloons going up. That's kind of cool.
Wow.
You missed on there. There you go.
I see it. Huh.
Yeah. See, natural selling is magic. So by the time you get there, they know you're coming. They have an idea of who you are. They've picked up on your energy. And now you sit down with them, or whatever you do. First of all, you don't necessarily sit down with them, but there's a process depending on what you're selling that you go through with them. And now you step into the discovering stage. But in the connecting stage, might have already done a little bit of discovering, right? You step in the discovering stage, and here's the secret. is it's basically all bought in the discovering stage. It's not bought in the presentation stage. They don't buy it there. They don't buy it in the committing stage. They've already done it. It's already been done. That's the whole key. That's the key to natural selling, is that it's sold in the discovering stage, because that's where the discussion has been made, the dialogue has been done, and everything has been agreed upon there. The rest of it is just putting it in a nice box and presenting it and putting a ribbon on top and just saying, here we go. Let's move forward.
Yeah, I was looking. I'm just actually going through the your first book, How to Sell Network, and I know there's a graph in there. You kind of flip the let's just say the time distribution, right? From a typical model, which is heavy on the presentation percentage of the time together is on presenting, versus in your model, it's, you know, a large majority is based around discovery, engage, you know, connecting and discovering.
Yeah. And it can be short or it can be long. You know, people say, well, how long does it take? So I don't know. How long is a piece of string? I mean, it depends. It depends on the person you're talking with. You
Yeah.
know, so it's and it depends on what you're selling. You know, a lot of there's no, how can I put it? It's just guidelines, which is why, on the scripting, I don't call it script, because script donates. This is a linear type of thing, and it's not script. I call it scripting guideline. Let me ask you this: do you think conversation is linear or is non-linear?
Non-linear, yeah.
Non-linear. But you see, but the way we learn and the way we structure things is that we learn in a non-linear way. How do we read a book? We read from chapter 1 through to chapter 11. Right? So, and how we taught at school, we're taught sort of methodically, for a linear way. But when it comes to conversation, it's not linear. So when we look at those 7 different types of questions, it's not a linear process where you ask a background question, then a needs awareness question, then a needs development question, and then a personal responsibility question, and then a solution question, and then a consequence question, and a qualifying question. They're just giving you all the different types of questions. You could do it that way, but it's very mechanical. But what you do is you flow between the two. You get into that flow. And it starts flowing in its own natural state. So, for example, let's say you and I had exactly the same capability right now, doing what I'm doing, right? Let's say we spoke exactly the same person. Well, we would come to exactly the same conclusion with that person. Would the path be the same there? I doubt it. The path will be different. Why? Because you would have your way of asking, or your way of approaching. I'd have my way, but the result would be exactly the same. Why? Because we had the same natural selling mindset and if you like, the structure, but we've thrown away the structure, but we're using the structure in a very non-linear way. Our energy and vibration is picked up by that person.
It brings to mind a word that gets thrown out there a lot, but I think it fits appropriately here. That selling this way is requires a paradigm shift. There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, that's the word that keeps coming to my mind when every time you and I have ever talked, I'm like, this is, again, it's not either or. I know you've caught a lot of, in your extensive career, you've had a lot of people contest how your model, and you say, again, it's not an either or. I'm not saying that, because I'm trying to find it, but I think you even said you're not changing your entire model. You're probably changing.
Where it came from is I was in a satsang at the Chopra Center one time with Deepak and a 77-year-old German physicist called Hans-Peter Dürr, and I was transitioning my logical mindset into more of, if you like, this, not emotional, I can't think of a word right now, but more of this sort of open mindset. We'll call it emotion. Emotion is not quite the right word. Anyway, and I'd accepted the whole idea of sort of the holistic way of looking at life and also the holistic way of selling, but it was still kind of moving into that area. And what he said was, what Peter said was, which made that instant shift, was, this is not an either or world, it's an as well world, right? In other words, if we start looking at things as well, is that you have your point of view, I have my point of view. We can discuss our point of views, but but as long as we steer away from saying you're wrong, I'm right. Okay, we have communication. We're able to have communication. We start listening for things that perhaps you've got, that I didn't know about, or that I might have thought in a certain way, that we can talk about and help me shift where I am, so we become more accepting. There's some things which are happening which are very hard to accept. And I appreciate that, that's happening in the world, but that's what that is all about. Is that creating a different vibration within ourselves, because that vibration will be reflected by the other person. Here's a clue. If you listen to someone, listen to them, really listen to them, not just listening selectively, not listening for the things that you want to hear, not listening for things that you want to respond to, but just listen to someone and where they're coming from, and ask questions around where they're coming from. They will listen to you. They have no choice, because it's the law of reciprocity. It's the law of giving. In Deepak Chopra's words, the law of giving. The law of giving is about giving, receiving, and circulating. Prove it to you. Walk along the street, look at someone who's coming in the opposite direction, who might not have a smile on the face, catch their eye and smile. I will guarantee they'll smile back, and I'll guarantee they'll hold the smile. And if you can look behind you, they'll look at somebody else, and probably they'll pick up on the smile and smile back as well. It's circulating. This is how we live as human beings. We can sell as human beings. It's human behavior. Treat people they want to be, the way they want to be treated. Not the way we want to be treated. By the way, that's the platinum rule by, who was it? It wasn't me. There's a gentleman who died a few years ago. He talked about the platinum rule. Alexander, can't remember his name. Anyway, not my stuff. He said, don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat people the way they want to be treated. And if you talk with them the way, they'll tell you exactly how they want to be treated.
Yeah. So if I want to learn the natural way to sell, and you mentioned earlier, it's not scripted, and that scares a bunch of, probably owners, sales leaders in our space, because they shell out all this money for preset appointments and leads, and we've got to, which the more you and I talk, the more I realize it's probably just an innate fear. But how do you, and I think you've said before, this is the reason why, like in network marketing, distributors teach a process, because it's repeatable, it's scalable, it's easy. How do you know?
And it doesn't work. It works maybe works for 1 or 2% of the people.
Yeah.
Those are the stats. It doesn't work. It's like I think I've said in this book, it's like flying from Los Angeles to New York in a plane that has a 98% chance of not getting there. Would you get on it? No.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with selling. The selling that most people are taught is fear-based. I mean, that's the way to look at it. It's totally fear-based. It's the fear of loss. It's the fear of not being able to get the sale. That creates an energy in itself, and it creates desperation. It's a scarcity mindset. And so the trick is to change it into an abundance mindset, which is what natural selling is all about. It gets rid of the scarcity.
You're bringing up a great point. It's and maybe this is something you can speak to. I mean, it sounds to me like you also have to end up doing a lot of training with people that you work with around their mindset.
Well, in my one-on-one coaching, that's what I do. On the online course, I'm attempting to do that, which isn't always that easy to do, because I'm trying to do this in a linear way. So the one-on-one coaching that I do is that's what I'm aiming at. That's where we're going. I'm looking at whereabouts on the sessions that we have, that I can help them flip that switch, and it's just a switch, and it goes from me to you. It goes from what's in it for me into what's in it for you. And the moment that's a realization, and it can only happen through sort of self-actualization, only happen through experience. So natural selling is basically experiential. You can't intellectualize it. You actually have to go and do it. You have to actually start asking the types of questions I'm talking about, to experience it. And all of a sudden you could see how the responses change. I remember when I finally grasped what this is all about, and started grasping it intellectually. Once I grasped this sort of missing link, that I've worked out, that I noticed as to what was the big difference, is that I was able then to sort of analyze what was happening, and it just flabbergasted me. It's just how different the responses were from people. And it's astounding, And I remember the first couple of times I kind of stared at my potential buyer and not really knowing what to say, because I was trying to process how easy this was. It was an exciting moment. And so that's what I'm looking for when I do one-on-one coaching, is as my students or clients go out and do it in the real world, they come back and say, okay, that worked, or I suddenly got it. And it's a wonderful experience. For me, it's great, because that's what I'm all about. That's my purpose.
Yeah, I mean, you've done it long enough that you don't need. It's not something. When you and I first met, I remember you kind of saying to me, "You're like, it's not something I need to do. I believe in what this is the right way." Because how many people you see out there that never get into sales because of all the preconceived notions, which are usually pretty real, right? About what it takes to succeed and how you gotta, like you said, loaded base questions that have no, they're all for your agenda and all the stuff. And I can see easily why people could be discouraged in versus
Yeah,
this
and
approach.
you can't blame them, because in most cases they've had to deal with people, pushy salespeople, whose objective is one thing: is get a sale, and they don't like the pressure. And I mean, it's very easy. If you press on someone, go out there and do it sometime today. Press on someone's shoulder. What will happen? They'll either resist or they'll push back. And that so-called objections that they come up with is them pushing back on something that you created in the first place. In other words, objections don't just come up out of the air. Objections come back from people who are objecting to your behavior. That's all they're doing. They're objecting to your behavior, and they're pushing back. And so even at the end, for example, we talk about objections. They're not objections, they're questions. Right at the beginning. You can get people asking you questions. Could be resistant type questions, or it could be just ordinary questions. At the beginning of conversation, the middle of conversation, or at the end of conversation, it doesn't matter. The moment you start treating them as objections to be overcome, you're now saying to that person, you're wrong. And none of us like to be told we're wrong. That's what you're doing. And so
Yeah.
immediately, and especially if that's at the end, you have a great conversation, they ask a question, you treat it as an objection to overcome, and all of a sudden what you've done is you've created a barrier. You started creating a barrier. Who created it? If you do it, you did. You created that barrier. Now you got to work out how to get over it, get over the barrier that you created. Never made sense to me. It's like, this is crazy. There's got to be another way.
Now, the same way that you're talking about this barrier that the salesperson obviously has created, knowing that we're going to meet with people, other humans that already have that preconceived notion and they're gearing up for the normal salesperson to come, and then Michael Oliver shows up and is completely different. Does that resistance melt away with the buyer because of this holy moly a different way? Like, or is that barrier still exists where they're prepared for war, the customer is, because of what they've experienced by everybody else, and then they meet you? Do you see that resistance kind of melt? What do you?
Well, again, the answer to that question, it depends. It depends on the person, and whether they've been abused by other salespeople before or not. It depends on how you approach them. It's what are the first things? Excuse me. The first things that you say or ask, that starts eliminating this idea of the feeling that they're going to be pressured into buying something is going to take some time. I mean, that's the whole idea. And it can be very, very simple. I talk about um, many years ago, I was looking for a printer. 20 years ago, printers were incredibly expensive. I mean, it was like, compared to today. you spend $2,000 on a printer. I mean, you can go to Costco and buy one for $75.
Yeah.
I mean, there are various types of printers. I
Yeah.
remember going into a printer asking for a printer, and it was a well-known what do you call it? There are a lot of stores around it. It's a well-known name. And the guy said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for a printer." He said, "Yeah, come on over here and I'll show you." And we went over to printers, and there's a whole row of printers on the shelf. And he said, "Okay, so this is this one, and what it'll do is this, this, or this, and what it'll do is this, this, and this, and this other one will do this. Now this one is cheaper, that one's better, blah 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 blah." And he said, and he came up and said, "But I think really what you're looking for maybe is these two here." I said, "Well, what I'm looking for is none of those." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "All I'm looking for is a workhorse, because all I do is I write books, I write articles, I write all sorts of things, and I'm looking for something that would just churn out very quickly print." I said, none of that stuff, none of those features are relevant to me." He said, "Oh, okay. Oh, so what you actually need then is this one over here." He said, and again, there are two of them. He went to another set, and he said, I said, "What's the difference?" He said, "Well, the black one is whatever dollars, and the white one was more expensive." He said, "You probably want the black one." I said, "No, I'll take the white one." And I could see it so quizzical in his mind. So it was exactly the same, but two different colors. And I relieved him of his kind of, his kind of distress. And I said, "You're probably wondering why I want the white one." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Because it matches the decor of my study." I mean, what goes back to benefit? I bought it because at the end of the day, the benefit was between the two was the white one went with my study.
Yeah. And that,
It wasn't cost. No, it was to do with something else. But I was letting him go through this whole thing because I was interested in seeing what he was doing and going, wow, if he cut to the chase and actually knew to ask me two, maybe three questions, he would have focused in on those two immediately, and he would have had a sale. Otherwise, if it wasn't that I knew what I was doing and sort of just just sort of playing with it, I'm playing with it in a nice way. I was kind of intrigued by the whole thing. I wasn't being nasty or anything like that. I just want to make sure you understand that. Is that I bought because I wanted it. I didn't want to wait. I bought. But otherwise, if he'd gone about it the other way, he would have helped me buy that, and it would reverse the process. So I would have bought anyway. But anyway.
it's I always tell this story because it's just something I lived personally, and it's been a reminder for me as and it, yeah, the poor, unfortunately, car people get the worst. They're always brought up in these bad stories, and but I was going to purchase a truck, and the guy just kept pounding me about the price, and he actually kept lowering the price without even me saying it's the price, right? And so he comes back, and I mean, and by this point, the price is actually, especially with online these days, I knew, I'm like, man, that is a great price. I don't deny that. Problem is, I don't want a red truck. I thought I told you that. Maybe I didn't. I don't know, but it's the wrong truck. And you mentioned this in the book, and I think it's great. Is first, I don't want to say step, but first phase is finding out if you can even help the person with their problem first. Basically, you say it way better than I do. It's the first thing I need to do is find out if there's even a sale to be made.
Hmm.
And I want to, if you don't mind, Michael, sorry, for anybody that watches this, I want to give the backstory because Michael's a very, if you can't tell, extremely humble individual. And I hope you don't mind me saying that, Michael. But there's people that are going to listen to this today, and they're going to say, "Man, this sounds really familiar to somebody else that's very well known all across the internet, and blah blah blah." And he's a little bit more outspoken than say Michael is. And one of the things I really it's at me. My value is to bring this up, and I don't need to even say names, but you know, I found out about Michael because somebody else said what I'm saying here right now. I was like, wow, that looks really familiar. That sounds like it's very much Michael Oliver. And I'm going, who's Michael Oliver? And I, sure enough, bring out the handy dandy Google machine. I do a couple searches, and it doesn't take long these days to pretty much find anybody. and I found you. I reached out to you completely blind and said, Michael, I'd love to have a minute of your time if you would. I bought this book that isn't easily found because it was written. When was it written, Michael?
About 2000, 2001.
That's it. Yep, copyright 2001. So, and then of course I look at, which I joked with you. I look at the title and how to sell network marketing. I'm like, well, that's an awful title. Just get, because no one likes network marketing, and I'm not a network marketer. But I was like, I got to figure this out. I read this book written in 2001, and I read word for word everything that's being talked about in this other environment online. Again, not using names, but and so when I got on the phone with you, or I'm sorry, got on a Zoom with you, Michael, you mentioned you trained that person in network marketing, and that person doesn't really recognize you anywhere. Matter of fact, he and another person who I did respect in the industry of sales released a book called The New Model of Selling. I bought the book, and I ended up, and I'm not a Yelp type person, a review type person, but I was so flustered. I did write a review, and I said I find it very interesting that someone can produce and copyright something that is word for word out of a book that was written in 2001 by the man who taught him. So when you're listening to this, folks in our group that are doing this, one of the reasons I wanted to bring Michael on is because, and we all say everything obviously is taken from, and we learn from others. And you talk about it in the book. I didn't create any of this. I just took a bunch of, stuff around Socrates from the, all the people that you credit, I love, right? But you made it into something that works for you. And, one of the things, like I said, that line of first sale is, or, the first thing is I need to determine if there's even a sale to be made. And it's word for word. The framework is word for word. You wrote in 2001.
Yeah, I started training Jeremy in 2002.
Yeah.
And personally coached him. In fact, he flew up to Vancouver to see me for a couple of days, and I coached him just shortly after that. It's even there's an audio of him thanking me for his success. I had no idea that he would basically, if you like, take all the material and the philosophy and the structure and stuff like that and use it himself. And we're still in conversation about that and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And by the way, Michael, the reason, team, anybody that's on this, the reason why I bring this up is because I don't want you to discredit our conversation here today, thinking that it's just another version of that. This is the original, and I appreciate it more just because of your humbleness and I mean, just the amount of when I read this book, this is probably one of the deepest sales books I've ever written, and I continue to recommend it to everybody. And I always joke, just don't pay attention to the title, right? Because naturally people are like, I'm not a network marketer. I'm like, I don't care.
There is the other book, which is How to Sell the Way People Buy, which is basically a condensed version of that and much deeper. And it brings in the neuroscience, because I was setting structures of questions, for example. I worked out a buying blueprint. You can find a person's buying blueprint and help them find it as well, with 5 questions. Literally 5 questions. You can get their outer logical, inner logical, and their inner emotional, subjective reason as to why they're going to buy something, and also and qualify it themselves as well at the same time. So that was I brought together into How to Sell the Way People Buy, and talk about in terms of the 3 main causes of rejection and objections, and also then the 5 principles. So it's not a how-to book from the point of view of approach. It's how to book in as far as how to rethink what you're thinking. You can get that online. You go to naturalselling.com and get that online. But that's a condensed version of it. That one there was stuff that I sort of understood for a long time, and I needed to get it into a book. In fact, I had to write a book at that time because that was the only way of communicating. The internet was around, but it wasn't that great. Facebook had just started, so it wasn't much way of communicating. It turned into a bestseller, so that was good. But it's self-published as well, which is why you can get it on Amazon if you want to read it. But it was geared towards network marketing.
Yeah, I just got that's kind of I mean you and I've communicated, but I got the updated version emailed to me.
Yeah.
You sent out for how to sell the way people buy, because the original one I probably got from bought from you maybe a year ago, I'd say, or longer, and it's I'm looking at now, I don't know, maybe 100 pages, and it's just packed with just even just if it's like, hey, I don't know if I can do it, again, either or as well. It's just so thought provoking about, wow, maybe there is a different way and to still be effective.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
We're close to an hour into this. Shall we
Yep.
let people go and do the
Yep.
things that they need to do and help more people and so on? Would that be all right?
100%. What I did want you to do, though, if you don't mind, we always run up right about an hour. I apologize, I didn't let you know that, but the is
Okay.
if you can go after this post in the group, it'll post the replay. You can add, if you would, please add I always tell, feel free to reach out to Michael. He's a member of the group. The group's private, but Michael's in the group. I cold emailed you one time, a
Yeah.
year and a half ago, so I know you're responsive. But also go to, if you can, put all your contact information in there, Michael, underneath this video later. Once it posts, it'll
Yeah.
do it in a few
Okay.
minutes.
Thank you.
But I'm assuming you're very receptive through Facebook Messenger in the group. I
Yeah.
highly recommend everybody. I personally have worked with Michael, get books, get courses, get it all. If it's, you know, the whole idea behind this group is bringing professionalism back to selling. And it's for guys and gals that want to take, and take their selling to the next level, to truly a professional level. Um, Not just a side hustle, not just a, whatever other word you want to code for, but and I think somebody that is serious about this business and really becoming, seeing where they can take it and what they can do, this is this is the model for it. This is because it's going to take a lot of work. I can tell you that right now. It's not easy. It's not just memorizing scripts, as Michael said, but it's well worth it. Not only for your results I've seen, but I think for your well-being. I really do believe that. My life has changed working with your model, and how, again, my intent truly being, serving the customer. You were the first one to teach me that. Why are you in business? And I'm like, oh, make a profit. And you're like, no, solve a problem first and foremost. Because if you don't have a problem to solve, you're not in business. And it's just, man, it's a whole different way and different feel. And the results personally have been night and day different. I was doing really well. Now I'm doing really, really, really well. But more importantly, it's enjoyable. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate your time, Michael. I know it's probably a little earlier in the day there. Let you get out to lunch, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. And again, please put your contact information in the comments once
Yeah.
this post. And thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Before we go, I just want to thank you for doing what you're doing. I look at your posts, I've read your posts, and I just like the philosophy and where you're coming from, and it just resonated, which is why I asked if I could join, with no
Yeah.
other reason. I mean, as you know, I'm not there to kind of plug what I do. I just like reading what you have to say. It helps me. I mean, every day is a growing experience. Like I think it is for everybody. So that was really really nice to do, and I appreciate you accepting me, and I thank you for having me on here. It was an interesting conversation. I'm probably ask you if I can use this because I think the interview was quite revealing, both from your questions and what was coming out of wherever it was coming from, because it certainly wasn't coming out of my head.
Yep. Michael, I appreciate it, and have a great weekend. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. You have a great weekend, and anybody
Thanks.
that is listening to this, have a great life.
Same. Thank you.